Good evening, everyone. Good evening and welcome to the Northwest Area Boundary Study, meeting number 2 here at Pikesville Middle School. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and thank you to our live stream viewers at home. Just a few reminders. We have sign-in sheets by the door for both our committee members and our observers. Please take a moment to sign in so that we have record of that for the meeting. In the event of an emergency, there are several exits throughout the room. Our preferred exit is back through the way we came in, the front, and exit to the left, to the front of the school. Once in the event of an emergency evacuation, such as a fire alarm, we would reconvene out in the parking lot out front and check names against our sign-in sheets. So again, please take a moment to sign in. For those of you joining at home, all meeting materials will be posted on our website at www.bcps.org. You can find us at the bottom of that page on the Resources button and following the link to the Northwest Area Elementary Boundary Study. You can find archived links of the prior meeting video, all the materials from the prior meetings, and tonight's materials will be posted tomorrow. We again remind our committee members, if there's an opportunity to speak tonight, we're going to ask you to please step up to one of the microphones. Our BCPS-TV crew is here, and in order to capture our voices and for the live stream content and for the video archive, it's very important that we step up to a mic. I know you have wonderful indoor voices and project wonderfully, but it does get lost on the recording. So please, if you're going to speak, take a moment to step up to one of the microphones. Thank you. Any observers that are joining us tonight, again, welcome. We remind you to please respect the space between the observer tables and the committee tables and allow the committee to perform their work uninterrupted. So thank you very much for respecting that. And with that, I will give it over to Mr. James up front from Cropper GIS.
Yes. Sorry about that. Thank you, committee members. Thank you for taking time out to be here tonight on this very important boundary study. And thank you, observers and those that may be viewing virtually. We have a similar agenda to last meeting. Where we will be going over some new information. We have some new options brought to you tonight based off your feedback. Have you collaborate in your small working groups to mark up those options, give your thoughts on some of the changes that are displayed there, and then discuss the thoughts as a whole with the rest of the committee before I get you guys out of here by 8 o'clock at the latest. So tonight's goals are just to review the enrollment statistics handout. It's very similar to the handout that you received before, but it just includes some additional information that we provided to you tonight that I'll go over here in a few slides, as well as the new options. So we have a total of 5 options here tonight. Options 1 and 2 are the same, and then 3 through 5 are new options based off your feedback. So just looking at the boundary study timeline, and we're here at our second meeting. We have 2 meetings after tonight over the next 4 weeks. On October 25th, at our 4th meeting is where we'll look to wind down to about 3 or 4 options that you as a committee feel comfortable bringing forward to the public information session that is scheduled for November 8th, 2023. So we're working our way through here, and we're getting to that midway point, but we still have a lot of work and a few more meetings to go through as we deliberate over options. So just to recap of why we're here, why are we conducting a boundary study for the Northwest area. There are 4 capital projects that are planned at elementary schools within this region. Those elementary schools are listed there below on this slide. They include Bedford Elementary, Summit Park Elementary, Deer Park Elementary, and Scotts Branch. And those capital projects are expected to add about 1,200 seats to the region. And they're expected to be completed sometime between 2024 and 2026. And then there's also some program relocations that are expected to be completed by fall 2026. And those program relocations are occurring from programs that are at Cantfield Early Learning Center. And they were returning students to their home schools within the study area. And it also includes the conversion of some half-day preschool pre-K programs to full-day programs as well. So just looking at our study area as a whole, there's 7 participating schools. For this boundary study here, our project schools are Bedford Elementary and Summit Park. Those are the 2 schools that are receiving additional capacity. And as we evaluate options, the capacity that we will be evaluating these options include the additional capacity that these capital projects are adding to those 2 schools. Fort Garrison, Millbrook, Scotch Branch, and Wellwood are also included in this boundary study. Scotch Branch is going to be participating in the subsequent boundary study in the fall of 2024, where that capacity number will be updated at that time. So the capacity number that you're dealing with for all these schools include the adjusted capacities with the exception of Scotch Branch Elementary. So just looking at the enrollment and why we're that support why we are conducting a boundary study for this area, you'll see that in this region there are a number of schools that are over capacity. You look at the column that shows the preschool / pre-K through 5th grade utilization post-movement. It shows the movement of those programs from Cantfield back to their home school and shows what that anticipated utilization will be for those schools. So as you can see here on this table that there are a number of schools, including Millbrook Elementary, Scotch Branch Elementary, and Wellwood that are well over capacity. And there are a number of schools, like including Bedford and Summit Park, that are well under capacity. So there's some room to operate to relieve some of the overcapacity schools with some of these schools that have additional capacity in this region. So looking at our objective is to provide capacity relief to the Northwest schools. Wellwood, Millbrook, Scotch Branch are some of the schools that are well over capacity in this region. We're looking to return the Bedford Elementary kindergarten and Millbrook Elementary kindergarten students that are currently at Cantfield back to their home zone schools. We're also looking at returning some of the early childhood 3- and 4-year-old programs at Cantfield Elementary back to their home schools in this region as well. Another primary objective of this boundary study is to eliminate the satellite boundaries that exist for Millbrook Elementary and Wellwood. And then we also want, as we look to evaluate and eventually get to a recommendation, we want to achieve the objective of improving transportation efficiency. Just a quick recap of the primary considerations and secondary considerations. These are like the rules to follow as we evaluate these options and abide by these rules as we make changes throughout this study area. We want to make efficient use of capacity in effective schools, so try to make schools all balanced to that 93% study area average, if at all possible. We want to look at maintaining or increasing the diversity among the schools to reflect the diversity of the region and the school system as a whole. A few of the secondary considerations that we want to abide by as we evaluate options are maintaining the continuity of neighborhoods. So not splitting down a residential street and keeping subdivisions and kids going to the same zone school with their friends and neighbors. We want to be mindful of the impact on transportation and in particular pedestrian patterns, which are walk zone area students, and be mindful of not moving students out of a walk zone and busing them to a school further away. Minimizing the number of times any individual student is reassigned. So just being mindful of any past boundary studies that were conducted in the area so that we're not impacting families more than once. Going to be mindful of long-term enrollment capacity trends and future capital plans. So in this region, we're adding 1,200 seats to the region. So we're working with those updated capacity numbers as we evaluate options and look to balance out schools within this region. Being mindful of feeder school boundaries and continuity of feeder patterns. So the migration of students from elementary to middle, making sure that we try to not create small splits if at all possible. And then some additional considerations are elimination of satellite boundaries, as Millwood and Wellwood currently have satellite areas, and they're just areas that are districted to a school that is not contiguous to the main school zone. And then using geographic features such as railroads, creeks, and major highways as good natural dividing lines. So some follow-up questions from meeting one that some committee members had and wrote on their parking lot attendance sheets. How are new residential developments considered in this boundary study process? BCPS coordinates with Baltimore County Planning to assess the impact of approved residential development on enrollment. The information on current approved residential developments, including the number of units that those developments is anticipated to have and how many and students that those developments are anticipated to yield. That is included in your Meeting 2 handout. This map here should be in a section there as well where you can see where some developments may be occurring in the area. So just a quick glimpse of that map, you'll see that there are some developments that are going to be occurring in what is currently Fort Garrison Elementary School Zone, and then there's also a few down there in Bedford Elementary School Zone. So kind of being mindful that those two areas as currently situated are expected to have some development in the near future. The student yields were calculated using yield factors from the BCPS student yield study that was conducted in 2022. And this data is just used to kind of inform you on as you evaluate options and making decisions moving forward throughout this process. Another question from Meeting 1 was, under what conditions may a student choose to stay in their school once a boundary goes into effect? BCPS offers a special permission transfer, which will be approved during the first year of a boundary change for students currently enrolled in grades 4 through 5, 7 and 8, or 11 and 12 of any school affected by a boundary change in an attendance area. If a student who meets this criteria also has a sibling that's currently enrolled in an affected school, that sibling would also be given the option to remain in that affected school through his or her terminal grade, given that their own transportation is provided. The school won't be providing transportation for those students. More details on that information of special transfer can be provided in policy by Rule 5140. So you can find that on BCPS website as well. Another question from Meeting 1 was, what is the state rated capacity to SRC? You'll see that in most of your tables. And how is it determined? It's defined by Maryland State Department of Education, and it's calculated based on the number of teaching stations, the classrooms in each school and how they are used, which subjects and programs that those classes may be used for. It only applies to the permanent building. When they calculate these numbers, it does not include any of the portables or relocatable classrooms that you may see on a school site. The room size and the standards for what may or may count towards the SRC, they're all defined by the Maryland State Department of Education. Another question from Meeting 1 was, can more information regarding Title I schools be provided? BCPS Office of Title I Homeless Programs and Community Schools webpage. This URL here, if you can go to this URL via this slide here, you'll be able to find more information on Title I schools and the criteria and how they're preserved throughout this process. Another question was diversity and demographic data. A few committee members had asked, is it possible for us to get information on demographic data by planning block? So we went ahead and we created a web map, not a web map, a map that you also should have in your packet as well. And it just highlights the planning blocks, the study area, and it shows what the majority race/ethnicity is for that planning block area. It's only referring to race and ethnicity. It does not include farms data, economic disadvantage data, or ELL data. We're still working through what we can provide and share publicly while preserving some privacies for certain student data. But as of right now, this is the data that we have provided, and it's a good insight to kind of understand the impact of demographics may be by moving one planning block from one school to another. So in Meeting 1, we also had a small group exercise where you guys were able to dive into the baseline options and then also evaluate some planning blocks as well. We got a lot of good feedback from Meeting 1 when you guys had your first look at some potential boundary options for this boundary study. And then based on a lot of that feedback, option 1 did seem to garner the most attention from most committee members. There were some that did favor option 2 as well. And some of the suggestive changes were trying to further reduce the utilization for Wellwood and Millbrook. So you'll see in option 1 and 2 that some of those schools are still over 100%. So there were some committee members that really expressed to try to reduce that utilization further to get it closer to that 93% study area average. There was also talk about Alter Street. There was a committee member who was very familiar with that area, and and that member had requested that to try to have that area zoned to the same school. I believe in option 2, it was split between Millbrook and Bedford in option 2. So you'll see in these subsequent options tonight that the residential areas of Alter Street will be zoned to one school or another, it won't be split. And then there was also talk about expanding Summit Park Elementary and Fort Garrison, getting Fort Garrison a little bit more involved with some of the relief with Wellwood, and then also maybe expanding Summit Park, given that they have the most additional capacity of all the schools within the boundary study area. So you'll see that option 3 through 5 definitely look to achieve that request of trying to get more students into Summit Park to get everything a little bit more balanced within this study area. So I'm going to go over a few slides with the draft of these draft options, and definitely want to remind you that these are all still drafts. It's our second approach at looking at some draft options. Nothing's written in stone. We expect changes to be made, and we appreciate all input on these draft options. But just remember that it's not the day to just choose which one's the best. Just give your input on them and what you like and dislike, and we'll share that as a committee with one another. So we do have 5 draft options. Again, option 1 and 2 are the same, no changes from that one. You're definitely welcome to revisit those options tonight as you see fit. But we do have options 3 through 5 options as well that are added, and you have those in your stat handout. We also have these options updated on Cropper on our web map, which is www.croppermap.com/BCPS NWES 2023. Where all 5 options will be displayed on there alongside the planning blocks and any other data. It's a really good resource that I encourage everybody to use. And again, all the copies of the handouts, PowerPoint, and any additional supplemental data that the committee receives tonight can be accessed under www.bcps.org under the Resources tab. So just looking at the additional draft options 3 through 5, just some bullet points on how they came about. They were developed from the committee feedback, looking at getting both Millbrook and Wellwood Elementary utilization under 100%. Looking at keeping the Alter Street community together, options 1 and 3 through 5 all do that. Looking to get some more relief to Millbrook by adding to Bedford. So there were some requests on, in particular, Bedford Elementary relieving Millbrook more. So you'll see that a number of these options do that, but option 4 definitely looks to advance that bullet point. And then looking at maximizing the utilization for Summit Park where practical. You'll see that Summit Park does extend a little bit more further west in these options here tonight, and option 5 in particular extends the most west, but it does achieve that good balance of utilization among all the schools within the area. So in your stat handout, you'll have your utilization table with your over under capacity column, and you can see here you have option 1 and 2, which are the same, and then option 3, 4, and 5 are included. You'll see that options that you'll have the utilization on the right column for each option, and then how many seats available or over capacity is a school is on the left. If it's a negative number, that means it's under capacity, and those are how many seats are still available in that option. If it's a positive number, as you see there, and like, for example, Scotts Branch is still 66 seats over capacity in options 3 and 4. So it's a good resource to kind of evaluate and see where the school's current utilization is and where they will be given these moves and these options. We also have our demographic table data that is included in your handout. Here we just show the current demographic percentage, and then option 4, all options are in your demographic tables are in your handout as well to evaluate all them comparatively, but just taking a good look at there and seeing where schools are currently and where they are in each option, and then kind of weighing how close that is to the study area average, which is that bottom row there that gives you the study area average for each demographic. Another table that you'll have is the impact tables. So you'll see here I give an example of option 3, and these tables just show you what students are impacted, what school they currently attend, which is that left column, the school that they would attend in an option, which is the middle column, and then how many students would be impacted given that change is the right column. If the row is green, that means no students change for that area and those students are preserved and not impacted. If the row is beige, then that means that those students will be impacted. So looking here, for example, in option 3, Fort Garrison, 11 students will be moving from Fort Garrison Elementary to Summit Park in option 3. There's also a total K through 5 living attendance students impacted table there that just sums up all of the beige rows in the option tables and gives you the total sum. So you get a good idea of how many students are impacted total in each option. There's also feeder pattern tables where you could evaluate the feeder patterns. Currently, all schools are feeding 100% into their neighboring middle school. You'll see in the options there is a split that does occur, and particularly from Bedford to Northwest Academy. In some of the options, it's only a 3% split, and that's that planning block, I believe it's 504 east of the 695 that gets moved from Scotts Branch to Bedford. But you also see that in some of these options, that feeder split goes up to 15%. So these students are migrating to middle school with some more familiar faces and friends. But overall, you'll have the overall splits, which is how many schools are split between more than one middle school. And in all these options, there's only one split that occurs, and that's from Bedford to Northwest Academy in Pikesville Middle School. There's also a walk zone table in there. There are 732 K through 5 students that live within the walk zone, and all of those preserved in these options, so we are abiding by those considerations of preserving pedestrian patterns. So I'll do a quick overview as some of this stuff is a little bit redundant, and you've seen some of these slides before, especially for option 1 and 2, but just a quick overview of the options. You have these maps in your handout as well, and when you're looking at these maps in your binders, if you see a black outline on there and you see a color bleed over, that means that shows that there's a change in that zone. So the black outline is where the current zone normally extends to, and if a color bleeds over, that's the school that zone is now changing to. But just looking at it, option 1 does provide capacity relief to Wellwood and Millbrook and eliminates their satellite zones. It does still have Scotts Branch at 116% utilization, and Millbrook is actually still at 102% utilization in option 1. Option 1 does impact the least number of students of all 5 options. But it does preserve all walk zone students, but it does create a 3% split from Bedford Elementary to Northwest Academy. Quickly, as I go to option 2, it does provide capacity relief and eliminates the satellite zones for Wellwood and Millbrook. Wellwood Elementary is still estimated to be over 100% in option 2. It does create a fair, more balanced split from the Bedford to Northwest Academy, as I could explained before. But option 2 does impact the second most students of all the options at 522 K through 5 students estimated to be impacted. Looking at the new options tonight, option 3, again, it does provide some capacity relief to Wellwood, Millbrook Elementary. Wellwood gets the most relief in this option compared to the other ones, gets all the way down to 87% in this option. But this option also impacts the second least number of students of all the options at 423. So we're getting more balance and we're impacting less students. So it's definitely a positive option to consider. Looking at option 4, it provides some relief to Wellwood and Millbrook. They're both under 100% at 93 and 94 respectively. Eliminates their satellite zones and preserves all their students. The 3% split from Bedford to Northwest does exist there, and it impacts about 455 students. So it's right in the middle of all the options when it comes to how many students it impacts compared to all 5 options. And lastly, we have option 5. Again, it does eliminates the satellite zones for Wellwood and Millbrook, provides some great relief to both of those schools at 92% estimated utilization for Wellwood and 94% for Millbrook. It creates a hair more balanced split of 15% from Bedford Elementary to Northwest compared to options 1, 3, and 4. But it does impact 533 K through 5 students, which is the most of all 5 options. All schools have seats available as there are 100% or less in this option. So all schools will at least have 1 seat available estimated with this option. So we're going to have you guys collaborate, kind of trying to get through that, so I want to give you guys as much time to collaborate in your small groups. We'll give each group about 45 minutes to review the draft options, about 15 minutes each option. You have your group has markers and Post-it notes Definitely encourage you to write on these maps, highlight any areas that you feel needs to be addressed. And then for the roles and responsibilities, kind of have a discussion guide, keeps the discussion on track, and make sure that everybody's voices are heard. If you have an opinion about a particular option or area, please vocalize that within your small group, and then subsequently with the larger committee after you guys meet. Have somebody report any of your group's findings. So if there's any common variables that your group is highlighting or things that you like or dislike, make sure you're writing those down so that you can share them with the rest of the committee when we regroup. We also have somebody to report. So once you guys are finished with your small group, select one or two of you to come up to the mics with any maps or information that you want to share with the rest of the committee about your findings. And then we also have a parking lot attendant. You all have your sheet, your orange sheet in each group. Please write down any questions that aren't able to answer tonight, and we'll subsequently bring back some follow-up slides in our next meeting to try to answer as many questions as possible. So during your group discussion, any findings, observations, suggestions, questions your group may have, kind of evaluate what are the strengths and limitations of each option, what you like about them, what you don't, what would you like to change. And then again, are there any concerns, challenges related to planning blocks and areas that you feel need to be reevaluated? So without further ado, I'll let you guys dive in there. It's about 6:30 now. We'll reconvene closer to 7:15, and then we'll share with each small group's work with the full committee. Thank you. Oh, yes. Microphone. Hold on, we have one question here, guys. 1 second.
Good evening, everybody. My question is related to one of the options, and I have to have clarification before we start. You talked about the split of some of the students from Bedford going to Northwest Academy. Mm-hmm. Can you speak more to that? Because in my mind, I didn't think that was an option that's outside of the boundary, if I'm understanding correctly. So yeah. Can you just speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So on your maps, I believe it's Planning Block 504, but currently Scotts Branch extends slightly east of the 695 to this area. And one of the goals is trying to use major highways as good dividing lines as we evaluate options. So you'll see here in most of the options, there's a pocket of students there east of the 695 that will be going to Bedford to create a nice clean line there. So that's where that 3% split comes from in most of those options. And the ones that get up to 5% split, you'll see that Bedford actually extends west of the 695 to give Scotts Branch some significant more relief and gets them down closer to 100%, because as you see in some of these options, Scotts Branch is still at 116% utilization. So, and if you see that Scotts Branch, when you see here the 3% split, it's coming from this area that's currently at Scotts Branch going to Bedford. And then in the 15% split, it's because that area is going to Bedford, and then also more of Scotts Branch area west of the 695 is being moved from Scotts Branch to Bedford. Does that answer? Yes. Oh, she asked, why are we talking about Northwest Academy? We're talking about the middle schools because those are the schools that the kids are going to migrate from elementary school to middle. So when kids graduate from 5th grade and they're ready to enter 6th grade, those are the middle schools that they go to. So part of our considerations is to be mindful of our feeder patterns. So where students are migrating from elementary to middle. So that's why that statistic is important, and that's why we evaluate that as we go through options. Good question, though. Any other questions before I break you into your small groups? Anything on your mind? All right, without further ado, I'll let you guys get to it. Oh, good job, committee. Just giving you guys about a 10-minute warning before we reconvene as a whole committee, about 10 minutes. All righty, committee. Can we wrap our conversations up? I heard a lot of good discussion. Get your final questions down on the mat. All righty. Do I have a group that would like to come up first and kind of share their group's thoughts on the options? Obviously, green group. Rest of the committee, can you direct your attention to the front? Oh, no, we're actually going that way. We're going that way. If you want me to hold it, I'll hold it. But if you got it, you got it. All righty. All right, committee members, we got Group Green up here that want to share their discussions, their findings of these options.
Hi, everyone. So we looked at options 3, 4, and 5, and we felt 5 got our vote for tonight with some modifications. So we talked about keeping planning block 209, which has 11 kids, into Summit Park instead of having those kids go into Wellwood. And then we also like this option because it provided really good relief to Scotts Branch. But one question we had was about transportation as related to students in planning blocks 515, 516, and 517. So we thought this was the best utilization of the space equity-wise. It seems like the kids were spread out a little more, even though we know it impacts the most students. But we thought this was really helpful to relieving Scotts Branch, which is over capacity in most of the other options.
Awesome. Anybody else from Group Green have any input that they want to voice to the rest of the committee? Any perspectives? Anybody have any questions for members of the Group Green about their decisions, observations? Oh, good. Thank you. Awesome. I guess I'll just come here to Group Yellow. You guys have been steadily waiting.
Hello, everyone. Short person. All right, so we thought option 3 was the better option in terms of utilization for Wellwood and Millbrook. It brought them down below 100% utilization. With one modification per the group, with planning box 404, 403, 402, and 401 moving over to Summit Park, because Summit Park could, thank you. Summit Park did have enough capacity to absorb these 4 planning blocks, and it presented a cleaner line in terms of 695 being a natural divider for those kids versus having them go to Fort Garrison, because per the planning block numbers, that would be 22 additional kids going over to Summit Park. Now, we did not pay too much attention to Scotts Branch, only because we do know that they will be a part of a future boundary study, and we wanted to keep in mind the consideration of having those kids having to be reassigned more than once in the event they were impacted in a future boundary study. Now, I did say to the group selfishly, as a Summit Park parent, I was okay with not having the extra 22 kids. So that was my personal opinion. But as a group overall, we did like option 3 with that one modification of those kids going to Summit Park.
Good information. Thank you. Good. Anybody else from Group Yellow have any perspectives, ideas, things they want to voice to the committee as a whole? Anybody? Awesome. I guess I'll jump over here. What group is this? Is it red? Blue. Sorry. Blue.
So we were similar to that one. We also liked option 3. We also agreed that we would utilize, or we would change rather, PB 402, 403, 404, and 101 to Summit Park. But we did change, sorry, you okay? We did think that it would help by moving PB 209, let me get this right, PB 209, 110, and 109 back to Wellwood. We're just curious how that would affect the numbers. We were trying to figure it out ourselves, but if that can be another option so we can see the numbers and then see how it affects everything. Let me make sure that's all that we were going to change. Oh, and then one more change, sorry, was 407 and 408 to go to Bedford.
To go to Bedford, okay. Awesome. Great. Anybody else from Group Blue? Anything else to say? It was an interesting perspective. She basically was campaigning for Wellwood to extend back east to pick up the area that's south of Summit Park. They currently already pick up a satellite area that's currently situated, so it's an interesting idea. So we'll see if we can get something Duran, as you can see those numbers. Last group, Group Red.
So our group was coming from 3 or 4 different schools, and we all have different strong opinions. So, and I believe that all of us have our thoughts based on the children. We were very concerned with the children. So our first concern, which we really can't help here tonight or during this study, but we do want to mention it, is the area down here at Bedford, that they are very overcrowded. And we were thinking, how can we move them? How can we lessen their load without making another satellite area? But we do think that that needs to be addressed somehow, but we're not sure how to do it. And because Wellwood is right in the path heading towards Summit Park, then that does make that difficult to do it without. And then one thing that one of our committee members feels strongly about is these schools that are already Fort Garrison should stay at Fort Garrison because it's not that many children, and Fort Garrison has the space, so why move them if they don't need to be moved? And the only reason why we thought maybe they should be moved was then because it is a smooth zone to keep Summit Park together. And then we were thinking that this area, 504, is now in Bedford, but it was originally in Scotts Branch, so if we left it in Scotts Branch, that would leave a little bit less for Bedford. And then we really do want to help them, but we don't know how.
And Millbrook needs a new school.
So just to get some clarification, I hear you, voice it. So just a little clarification, you're concerned that Bedford's getting too full in these options, or do you feel that their resources should be extended further east? Just for clarification, so the committee can kind of understand your viewpoint.
That if we could just lessen the load for financial reasons, for the student population that's there, just to make it more diverse in our area, because that's heavily populated one way. So we kind of want to like relieve that. Okay. And they also, there's so many needs that if we share the load would be easier to address.
I think that, we feel very strongly that if you look at just look at the population density, it's all right here. And so without just moving everybody to different schools and kind of divvying them up, which we're trying not to do, right? Transportation's already a mess. We don't want these satellite zones. There needs to be another option to offload, and BCPS really needs to be looking at this specific area to do something about it going forward and provide them better resources, a bigger school, something to offload this, because what exists right now is not going to solve this problem.
Good input. Does any committee members have any questions for them? Need any clarification? Points? Any input? Please don't hold back. It's doubling in size, yes. Yep.
Yeah. We will say that we were in conflict.
So just to put a cap on it, you're concerned of Bedford being overcrowded in these options?
Well, that's one concern.
One concern. One concern.
Here she comes.
I just want all of the committee members, because you guys had really great discussions. I heard, but I want them to hear.
The conversation we had was not just a Bedford conversation. The conversation that we had was the looking at the densely populated, I don't know, Liberty Road corridor, whatever we call this like part of town that includes Bedford, Millbrook, and Wellwood. All three Title I schools, all three have some challenging populations. We know Bedford's getting a large school, we're gonna have more students, but to start at almost 96% capacity seems a bit much. We talked about the fact that Summit Park, which is a higher socioeconomic school, is gonna have 130 open seats in pretty much most of these plans. So the conversation was, is there a way to slowly adjust up, not just from Bedford, but from Wellwood, Millbrook, Bedford, to move some seats towards Summit Park while keeping the capacity reasonable at Bedford, Millbrook, and Wellwood.
Okay.
Does that capture?
Yes.
My team, does that capture the conversation? Okay, thank you.
Good. Paul, you want to say? Good.
If you're going to make a comment, I will bring the microphone to you so that we can record this and so people can hear what you're saying.
Awesome. Good. Do we have anybody else who wants to make a comment about the work tonight? I do want to reiterate that we still have 2 other meetings prior to our public information session. Sometimes we're not going to be able to resolve everything in one meeting. I heard great conversations tonight, but sometimes you think we got to solve the problem and kind of come to a resolution right there in a moment. But we have time. You guys have been working great as a committee thus far. We're going to take all the feedback that you guys have displayed tonight and wrote about. I see a lot of questions on some of the parking lot attended sheets. So we'll go and reevaluate these things, try to take your perspectives into consideration, come back with some modifications for you to evaluate moving forward at our next meeting. Does anybody else have anything else to say before we adjourn? Oh, you got it.
Just quickly, so that, because we had a little confusion, I don't think everyone is clear on the blueprint and the criteria for pre-K. Some parents need to know that, so maybe there's a way that BCPS can make it clear to parents and everyone observing, so that they know the criteria and the qualifications and the mandate.
Are you kind of referring to like the considerations to follow, and then also some of the movement of the preschool, pre-K? Okay, yes. We can definitely reiterate that, bring a slide back at our next meeting that kind of goes over that, to give everybody a good refresh on what those movements are occurring in the study area, and then obviously the primary and secondary considerations, if there is any more explanation for those. One more comment.
Thank you. And also building on that one, I'm not sure if it's captured in the enrollment numbers or not, but the anticipated capacity, by my interpretation, is just K through 5. But if all of the 3 and 4-year-old programs are moving to home schools, that doesn't seem to be factored into this capacity and or enrollment. That needs to be a bit more transparent.
We did factor in the movement of the pre-Ks, but next meeting, we will make sure it's very clear and articulated in a document.
Absolutely. Another question.
Thank you. Now, I did have a question that some of my committee members answered, but I also just want to put it out there if anyone else is thinking about it. In terms of the schools that are increasing their capacity, such as Summit Park, my concern as a parent is, does increased capacity mean additional resources being sent to that school in terms of number of teachers? Because if they're getting all these additional kids, where are the additional resources coming from?
The staffing at the schools is based on the number of children that are in the school. There's a formula that HR uses to make sure that the teachers and other support staff are commensurate with the number of students that they have.
Good question. Anybody else have any questions before we adjourn tonight? No? Great work. Our next meeting is Wednesday, October 11th, 2020. this year, from 6 to 8, same time. Please bring your enthusiasm, your committee hats, and we'll look to continue working on these options. Thank you all. Have a good night.